Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, hit that like and subscribe button. Check us out on Patreon if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter. The link is in the description. And a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for everything you do. It is incredible to us. We love you. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And a big shout out to our good friends Dice Legion. Use the promo code SINISTER. Get 10% off all your ttrpg needs. The link is in the description. This week we are talking about the War Domain Cleric. The War Domain Cleric comes to us from the player's handbook. This is a very unique cleric because war can be really violent and vile and evil aligned, and it gives you an opportunity to pick such great deities to follow, even if you don't want to be a good aligned cleric. This is a great way to be one of those. And the way you can justify that is healing isn't necessarily doing good. Healing is a responsibility to keep your troops going. That's one way to look at that, and you can look at buffing and supporting as more of a commander's role in this kind of an aspect. I can see a war priest being someone that is looked to for guidance and trying to come up with plans and really seeing and constructing stratagems in order to win and succeed. A lot of great ideas come when you can start adding in that kind of darker mentality to a war domain cleric. Anytime you get to add evil to the cleric, it is always exciting. This one works really well, even with hobgoblins, which is again my favorite species, which we just covered, because Magoobliet would be a being of that would really fit war, because when Magoobliet makes his call, every goblinoid must answer, and they all go off to war. So it fits really well, Magoobliet being the god of all the goblinoids, and you have that great opportunity to now be a hobgoblin war cleric, which is very exciting. And now you can kind of see the mentality behind it. Anything that has an aggressive military force, this could be that cleric. Your goal to heal isn't because you're doing it because you care about someone. Your goal to heal is because the longer your grunts live, the better your chances of succeeding. And now you've managed to heal for a vile and selfish purpose, but for such a supportive circumstance that you're such a benefit and a leader, and you can see where that duality exists, where you can be that cruel cleric, that dark cleric that runs around with a morning star and really just like cleaves into things, like, because your mentality is based on violence. You get this great ability to be this beacon of this scary hope. Because you will instill this great glory of divine magic to help such an evil goal. Like it's a cool way to really dive into that. Bonus proficiencies. At first level, you gain proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor. This is really beneficial because there's a lot of clerics that have the availability to wear heavy armor, and this makes you very tanky. The martial weapons, here's the issue that a lot of people see right off the bat. If you go straight cleric, which I tend to go the non-multi-classing route with everything, but you don't get extra attack, and that really affects how your damage output goes. So a lot of the issues people find is how do you compensate that? But understand, as a cleric, you do have plenty of ways to augment and sustain your own damage. You have spirit guardians, which if you're in somewhat mid-range, you can hit a lot of things with as an AoE that does a lot of damage. You have spiritual weapon, which ends up being a domain spell, so you always have that prepared as a war cleric. And you have a lot of strong offensive spells, and you don't need to worry about whether or not you're hitting hard enough with the magical weapon, because all you really need as a cleric is the understanding of your spell list, because everything you need is in that spell list, and everything to be detrimental and dangerous is in that spell list. They have great offensive spells in that spell list. They always get overshadowed with healing and supporting spells because they're healing and supporting spells, and everyone kind of needs some sort of healing or something, or the right buff at the right time can turn the tide of battle, and I respect the hell out of it. It's one of those things that, like, when you see it happen, it's amazing. I like debilitating enemies more than I like buffing my allies. That's just kind of who I am. But the reason why you gain martial weapons is something we're going to cover in one of the other abilities that comes up soon. War Priest. From first level, your god delivers bolts of inspiration to you while you are engaged in battle. When you use the attack action, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. This is complex in its reasoning. So this is kind of why you get the availability to use martial weapons. The issue here is you can only use it a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier per long rest. So at maximum it's 5 times. And it does eat up your bonus action. So how do you use this effectively? What is really the strategy here? Why are you doing this as opposed to regular attacking and using spiritual weapon? First and foremost, if you're not going to upcast spiritual weapon, there is a limit to how much damage you can do. Secondly, if you gain the right magic weapon or enchantment on a weapon, you can deal a pretty sizable amount of damage by doing this as a bonus action. The caveat here is which resource do you want to spend in which circumstance. In my mind, earlier on at lower levels, I would use this more. Or first before I use spiritual weapon, because you're going to use spiritual weapon. You just are. It's going to happen very often. It's one of the more frequently cast offensive spells that a cleric uses, and you'll see why. It's fantastic. So burning a spell slot for spiritual weapon might be a little bit more taxing earlier on, in which case War Priest will compensate for that. The further on you go, depending on what weapons you gain access to, what enchantments, what specialized things you're wielding, you may be better off attacking twice. The caveat here is, as a cleric, even with full plate and a shield and whatever other things you have going on, do you need to be in melee? No. Do you need to be somewhat in mid-range to be most optimal? Probably. That's kind of where I would put clerics. But having this as an option to conserve spell slots or other resources is a valuable thing, and you can use it pretty regularly. So it's more so an additional option you have that you wouldn't have with anything else. Just a real quick multi-classing thing. If you are a Spores Druid, you want this. Channel Divinity, Guided Strike. Starting at 2nd level, you can use your Channel Divinity to strike with supernatural accuracy. When you make an attack roll, you can use your Channel Divinity to gain a +10 to the roll. You make the choice after you see the roll, but before the DM says whether the attack hits or misses. Channel Divinity is a very interesting mechanic. It is a cool thing to do, dependent on what you're in and what circumstances you're in. At 2nd level, with War Priest and martial weapons and heavy armor, yeah, sometimes you're going to need to drop that guided strike, because you know what? At that kind of point, one hit can make a huge difference. And if you're not fighting undead for this entire section of whatever campaign you're in, then this is going to be your better option. It only works on you, so be a little selfish. If you ever have to make a melee attack, use it. So just make sure to understand that even if you wanted to use a ranged attack, it still works. Ranged War Priest is a thing. It can happen. Channel Divinity, War God's Blessing. At 6th level, when a creature within 30 feet of you makes an attack roll, you can use your reaction to grant that creature a +10 bonus to the roll, using your Channel Divinity. You make this choice after you see the roll, but before the DM says whether the attack hits or misses. This here is a significant upgrade of what your normal Channel Divinity is, the Guided Strike. The reason why is because at 6th level, there are people whose attacks will be exceeding yours. A Paladin with a higher level smite, a rogue that went straight rogue, their sneak attack will do pretty sizable damage at 6th level. You really get this opportunity when you're fighting something and the fight is going bad. If you're not fighting undead, then this is a great use of your Channel Divinity, because it gives you the necessary option to turn a needed hit into a hit. How many times have you been in a fight where you're fighting something and it's just destroying your party, and then the rogue misses and then the rogue goes down? You know what I mean? Like, it could be the bigger difference of winning a fight when you drop this, and dropping it on the right ally is really what the purpose is. This is where you look to your min-maxing friends. This is where you look to those people who study the numbers and sit there like Monk and D4. Like, you look at those guys' builds, and if somebody's running a build similar to that, that's the guy you use this on, because that's going to be the most opportune moment. And I think that solidifies who the War Cleric is, because you get the ability to use it on yourself, and when you can, it's great, and it's divinely more powerful at that point. But the further on you go in levels, you start to see and understand where that comes from and where your power is, and now you make that correct tactical decision as a leader on the battlefield to win the fight. And you can see that, and it enforces that ability. And that's really what specifically I really like about this subclass, is when you're using the Channel Divinity to bolster the correct ally to win the fight. It kind of just connects with the War Domain Cleric. It really puts that in perspective, that it's not about you, it's about our victory. And that really kind of just gives you that subtle little hint that just kind of ties everything together. Divine Strike. At 8th level, you gain the ability to infuse your weapon strikes with divine energy. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to deal an extra d8 damage of the same type dealt by the weapon to the target. When you reach 14th level, the extra damage increases to 2d8. So a lot of the times you won't be reaching 14th level, as most campaigns tend to peter out at 12 or 11. So your regular attack will do, if you're using like a one-handed martial weapon, 2d8 plus whatever things might be added on. You're at 8th level, you have magic weapons at this point, you picked up a magical weapon, whatever added onto it works. So you'll get 2d8 plus whatever your ability modifier. Say it's say you have a 20 in strength, and so it's 2d8 plus 5 for your first hit. Your next hit will be 1d8 plus 5, but overall your damage will be higher than if you hit with regular extra attack without any special weapons or anything added onto it. This again is an interesting circumstance because it's trying to push you into melee combat, which you don't have to be in, but you could be. If you were wielding like a ranged weapon like a halberd or a pike, you would still get this because you are still hitting a creature with a weapon attack, and you still are far enough that you can not step over the toes of a barbarian or fighter or anything like that that might be soaking up those front lines. Who you want to be at this level, you should have probably already been practicing and working towards. if you're concerned about damage as a cleric, throw on Spirit Guardians. Like, that's it. That's all you need. Put out Spiritual Weapon. Whatever you need. Just drop those spells and your damage will be fine. Just stand close enough. You could drop those spells, keep an enemy within range of that, and then just Sacred Flame everything you need, or any of the other spell cantrips. Toll of the Dead would be great. And that'll compensate for most of your damage. You'll be seeing a lot of Toll of the Dead, as long as you're not finding things that are resistant to necrotic, usually. But I encourage you, if you're considering playing a war cleric, to take the initiative and be a little stranger. Be melee. Go for it. Get in there. Get in the mix and start throwing out attacks and try and get the full understanding of the abilities by actually using them. And then if things are not working out, fall back and be a cleric. Like, you have that availability. And if you're someone who can go from the front lines to the back lines and still be viable, spend some time in the front lines so that way your people that need to be in the front lines can last a little longer. Having more than one target tanking is going to be better for you, because the barbarian's going to run out and fight a whole bunch of stuff, but if the barbarian's out there and the fighter and the circle of the moon druid are out there, it makes it easier for all three of them to survive. Because that damage gets split out amongst them, and it's easier for you to cause victory by not having the enemy the ability to just whittle down one person at a time. Avatar of Battle. At 17th level, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. Here is a fantastic thing. Slashing damage is the number one damage you take as a player. Almost everything does it. Regular claw attacks, unless they're listed as to being magical, are not magical. So the plethora of enemies you'll fight from level 1 to level 20 will do slashing damage of the non-magical source. This, as a defensive buff, is incredible. It just flat out is. It's profoundly amazing to have all the defensive benefits of rage on passively at all times, no matter what. It's incredible. It as a defensive move, it's awesome. You get it at a high level that basically is going to go unseen for most people who play, unfortunately, but it makes a huge difference. And at higher level combat, the numbers that you face when you get hit with something can be shocking. So when you have something that can reduce some of that by half, and 3 things by half, if you pick a specific species that maybe gives you resistance to something, fire or cold or anything like that, you start to tack on a lot of resistance, and you can really go quite the distance that you really wouldn't expect, especially considering a cleric is kind of what you went for. But clerics are nasty in D&D. They are not the white mage from Final Fantasy who sits in the back. They are up front. They are devastating. They are heavy hitters. They are tanks. They are everything. Which is why, if you really wanted to ruin your DM's life, you all roll clerics. Our final thoughts. The War Domain Cleric fits this great Gish kind of a build for a cleric. It does require you to kind of really focus in on who you want to be and kind of make that DM give you a wish list of magic items, because, truth be told, without a magic item that does additional damage, you're always going to feel not as good as any of the other Gishes who have extra attacks and things like that. The investment to gain extra attack might be a little much if you're considering multi-classing. Unfortunately, there isn't anything that gives you Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade that is wisdom based. So you're kind of really stuck in that funky little circumstance. But the important thing to know is that you don't need those things as a cleric. You have everything you need as a cleric to do the damage you need. And don't be overshadowed by how other character classes do their damage. And don't compare the cleric damage to any other class besides the cleric. I cannot tell you how great it is to have a circumstance where you're not a charisma-based character and you can still instill leadership and presence without needing to roll high in charisma constantly. The war domain cleric has a place as a counselor or even a leader for a party. And you get these great strides to kind of reinforce that. You can buff the right people. You can do other things to inspire them. There's a plethora of buffs that you can do to radiate the empowering presence that you have on the field. You're a cleric. You are nasty as it is. There is nothing that's going to really take you down easily. And you have this opportunity to be evil, to really dive into war as your prayer. War is how you honor your god, and that's a beautiful way to make an evil cleric. And once you start throwing evil into cleric, you start coming up with these great concepts for your own characters to be slowly like developing. Maybe after the campaign ends, you become the big bad evil guy. And I love those concepts where you can be this growing evil, where you can manipulate the machines of war. You can see wars going or wars about to brew, and maybe you're at that circumstance where like your party's trying to stop it, but you know what? You really need that war because you haven't prayed to your god the correct way in a long time. You could even show a little bit of insanity, which is a cool concept. Like you can show battle and conflict as this great thing where maybe you go on monologuing rants as you cast your spells in the battlefield. Maybe sometimes victory causes you to drop to the ground and just cry out in laughter. And you really build on this heavy tone of just the darkness and the violence being the only way to show admiration to your god, because you do this and you sacrifice the most vital thing that you have, which is the life of your countrymen, to them. And that fuels this divine power to you, and it's just exciting to see that. I think that's a great scary character to have with you. That being said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. Definitely tell us about all of your war domain clerics or any kind of evil clerics you've had, specifically hobgoblin clerics, because I love hobgoblins. Definitely check us out on Patreon if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter. The link is in the description. A big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for everything you do. A big thank you to our good friends at Dice Legion. Use the promo code SINISTER. Get 10% off all your purchases. Their link is also in the description. And thank you so much for giving a spooky kid a chance.